One of the things that makes Dice Throne so special to me is the unique experience every time I sit down and roll dice. The cards that I draw for the starting hand, the opponent that I'm looking at across the table, that unknown of what's about to happen and transpire, the story that we're about to tell between two characters. And after probably tens of thousands of games of Dice Throne, I would play right now, and I would probably play all evening if I could. Hi, my name is Manny Trembley. I am one of the game designers and the artist for Dice Throne. I grew up in the western suburbs of the Minneapolis area, and in that area is where I kind of first started riding my bike to comic book shops, and I would spend a lot of my time kind of sifting through long boxes. It jumped right to X-Men, and that was kind of a real pivotal moment for me in terms of my appreciation of art and my desire to be a comic book artist. So this is a collection of all of the comic books that I have made over the years. It's kind of overwhelming sometimes when I look at them all on the shelf like this. So the next book was called Underwear, Just Made You Say Underwear. And I had wanted to always make a superhero book, and I loved the idea of two superhero families that war over whether you should, as a superhero, wear your underwear over or under your tights. I'm an over tights person. So Victoria Jr. is this little human girl adopted into a family of monsters. What I love so much about Victoria Jr. is that it has allowed me to explore some questions I've also gone through. I was adopted by my dad, so the idea of being adopted into a family and being welcomed was a key part. In 2004, I moved my family to Spokane, Washington to work for Cyan Worlds, the people who make Mist and Riven. That was my first big boy video game that I got to do. And after a few years there, and then I worked for an app development company alongside Nate, who is a longtime friend. We've known each other for probably the last 20 years. August of 2016, Nate and I both got laid off from the same company. We had been working on developing a game for a while up to that point, but once we both got laid off, we kind of decided, why not just make a game?
I'm Nate Chatellier. I'm one of the co-founders of Dice Throne.
Hey, I'm Gavan Brown. I'm also one of the co-founders of Dice Throne.
I said, hey, we want to come drive to Calgary. We want to show you this game. But I remember Gavan was trying to be polite, and he basically was like, I mean, it looks good, but the chances of me actually doing this are very, very slim. But you're welcome to drive up here.
Oh, there's a second one.
I tech him!
You're gonna tech Grandpa?
He doesn't have to.
Ooh, you got the 5 and the 6, so it is a large straight.
But
Totally.
anyway, deal 15 damage.
26 health.
Dice Throne is a dueling game where you're going to be rolling your dice to activate abilities on the board, and you can use cards to manipulate those dice for or against your actions. It's kind of been compared to like Magic meets Yahtzee.
There's actually an insane amount of depth. From a product design perspective, it was literally like a dream. It was like perfect.
When you roll those dice, the dynamic nature of it, you're trying to get abilities on the board, you're trying to mess with the opponent's dice, you're trying to fix your own rolls to get better abilities. And that's really where the power of the cards and the timing of the cards comes into play. The what's going to happen moment of rolling dice is so exciting, and I feel like Dice Throne really encapsulates that feeling.
I watched a video of a guy, and he was like, with absolute conviction, he said, this is the best game I've ever played in my life. What the three of us kind of came up with was, we should really partner 3 ways, Nate, Gavan, and Manny, and just make this its own company.
Go after him, he is the highest.
No, I'm going to get rid of him.
Get rid of me? I'm out. I got put down. One of the things I love about Nate is he has this huge vision for where Dice Throne would go. But one of those objectives was to make Marvel Dice Throne. We both loved games like Marvel vs. Capcom and stuff like that. One of the key points in my life was when I first discovered X-Men comic books. It was X-Men 277. and I opened it up, and it was Storm dodging lasers in space. And I was like, I'm gonna make comic books when I grow up. And now it's so interesting to see myself decades later having made Marvel Dice Throne. It's very surreal. The middle of August was when Nate first brought the first prototype of Dice Throne. And then a mutual friend of ours had suggested the PAX Indie Showcase. We would get to pitch and promote it at the show. But the game was 2 weeks old at that point. We busted butt, we made our prototype, we sent it in, and lo and behold, they took it. Once they agreed to put it in the showcase, we realized we have to build an entire game by January, figure out manufacturing, get our booth ready, and have a Kickstarter live at the same time. We launched the Kickstarter 2 days before we showed up at PAX South. We did not think we were going to fund within 48 hours, but we had fully funded and we arrived at PAX elated and super pumped to share the game. So in 6 months, we went from laid off at the same company to prototype to finished game arriving at PAX in January. I recently got an Intel NUC, and one of the things I love about it is it handles all of my illustration programs amazingly. I use Photoshop, Clip Studio, Premiere, After Effects. It also handles Tabletop Simulator, which we use almost daily to do testing for Dice Throne. Considering the amount of programs I'm often using at the same time related to illustration, editing graphics, or running Tabletop Simulator, the NUC handles them all seamlessly. We load all of our assets into it, so all the heroes, all the variations, all future iterations of our heroes, and it is very taxing to open those files. The 12th Gen i9 processor and the 3070 GPU are absolutely incredible for all the projects that I work on. Recently, Elden Ring came out, and I've been dying to try it, and I haven't had a ton of time. But now that I have the NUC, I've been able to play it, and it runs amazing. It's super useful having something that's as powerful as a desktop, but transportable like a laptop, and it's able to run all their needs at a convention. I recently brought it with me to PAX East, and I'm going to be able to bring it to our other conventions to handle whatever we need for video and computer processing. The sizzly.
Put some lettuce on there.
I put a drop on
Olives
the
and
floor.
salsa.
You put a drop on the floor? Alright, let's not step in it. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this dinner, for our food, our family being together. And we're grateful for you. Praise all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Alright, who's next? Years ago when we were trying to have children, my wife had 2 miscarriages. And the first one was particularly traumatic, where she miscarried at night. I remembered standing there crying in the bathroom. And after having gone through both of that, I remembered feeling very cold. I was angry, upset, whatever. Through that process, I remembered thinking, I can choose to cordon myself off and not allow myself to feel. But if I do that, I will hurt my wife, I will hurt other people, any future children I have. And I remembered, I was like, I have to choose to love again. And I had this idea for a comic book that walked through the life of my wife, myself, and my children, and how our lives begin and our lives intertwine together. We experience loss, and then at that moment, you have to choose. Will you choose to love? And if not, things can go south and negative. It was one of the most poignant experiences for me, cathartic really, and it helped me to express my feelings. So it was probably one of the most pivotal books for me that I've ever made. I think Dice Throne is a subconscious expression of myself, but I'm an emotional person. My brain doesn't shut off. I'm constantly thinking and feeling. Therefore, the way I use my comic books is different than I use board game art or story. even within this world, the stories for each character that I've created, they touch upon an aspect of life. Like the barbarian's narrative in my head focuses around a father and a son, and the son making the father proud. I like to tell stories, but I have chosen not to tell those yet. Honestly, that's why they're called Vampire Lord and Samurai. It's not Samara, the Vampire Lord, you know. I wanted you as the player to craft your own narrative while you're playing. And that's what makes Dice Throne so special.